Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, I was discussing the musical tastes. I have certain musical tastes, certain things, certain groups that I am into, bands or whatever you want to call them, and musical groups, different tastes. I like rock, of course. I like country. I'm into, like I said, the Irish music as well. I admit that I'm particularly fond of the one that left the Celtic Woman group, Lisa Kelly. She was always my favorite in that group, but the new ones they got seem pretty cool. They seem pretty cool, and I like why Lisa Kelly left. I like that she left to teach music to students, to young people, help people find their talent, which is a very good thing to do. So, she left in a very good cause, and certainly her life to do as she wants with, So, but I mean, I miss seeing her on that, But at least there's the older stuff, that has her on it. Let me see. I think it's kind of funny. She's not quite, but close to the same age as myself, which is, I think, kind of funny. Let me see. What else? Currently, like to role play on an internet online simulation game quite a bit. It's called Nation States. I have certain nations that I RP or role play as. One is kind of a modern version of the Roman Empire, for example, and there's a few others. One's kind of a dystopian society with, a little bit of borrowing from other ideas, but, kind of giving my own slant, kind of my own twist on, things like Vulcan and Plato's Republic, kind of a police state run by technocrats. They tend to repress emotions and so forth. And I'm kind of role-playing right now that they're going through a reform period under a general, a military man who's kind of taking advantage of the opportunity to reform them. He's kind of, even though he's a general and a military dictator, he's kind of improving their lives in many ways. He's not necessarily a very nice guy all the time. He's kind of ruthless, but he is kind of helping them along in a different direction. And so you get that element with him. I like to play different types of characters, and he's kind of one of those a cross between a standard military dictator and a pragmatist type, and also in some ways kind of a Gorbachev-like figure. I mean, he's got that whole glasnost perestroika thing going on. Which, if you know from history, the Soviet Union and the downfall of the Soviet Union, glasnost and perestroika, ultimately, I think, will have proven a good thing for Russia, but it came at a high price as far as the Soviet system. The Soviet system was doomed. It was doomed anyway, but it just kind of speeded things up. Because you can't, introduce just a little bit of freedom and have people stop there. They're going to want more. On the other hand, they were going to collapse at the rate they were going. This lighting is kind of different. I'm still getting used to that. How it looks, and with the webcam, it looks different. Let me see. I have fairly strong political views in some areas. I've been pretty much a lifelong Republican. I don't mean this to be personally in your face to Democrats or anything like that, but I mean, my views are my views, and I tend to have a libertarian slant to that kind of conservatism. I tend to be a little mistrusting of the idea of government being the guardian of certain things and controlling things and so forth, having too much of a role in our daily lives. I mean, if you look at what happened in the 19th century, we were in many ways we were not necessarily very free in some ways, but in other ways we actually were freer. We actually didn't have the government meddling in our daily lives, trying to control everything, trying to tell us what to eat, trying to tell us how much salt we could have, what kind of drinks we could have. I mean, that's been a 20th and 21st century thing. That, the government's been meddling in those areas, and not a good thing at all. I mean, if you look at what Bloomberg did in New York City, it's very bad. He was not wanting food aid to reach people because he couldn't verify the salt content. I think that people in the wake of the tropical storm or hurricane, what you want to call it, Sandy, were more concerned with getting some stuff to eat that was edible than whether or not there was salt content or fat content or how many trans fats were in the food and so forth. I mean, the priorities for Mr. Bloomberg were, to put it mildly, rather questionable. And it's kind of a pie-in-the-sky, ivory tower, limousine liberal kind of thing for him to do that. We're better off than you. We know better. We're contributing so much of our own money to the state, so therefore we should get to kind of have a better, more say in how you live and how everyone lives. Because we know better, It's kind of silly, It's basically a certain arrogance and condescension and disdain for the average American person. I'm not anti-intellectual by any means, quite the opposite. But I find that kind of smug sense of superiority to be very disgusting. It's very un-American. It's very elitist in many ways. And not necessarily at all what this country is about. I mean, let's be honest here. This country is not about some well-meaning but completely off-the-wall fascist type. Sitting in City Hall telling you, okay, this is what you can eat and this is what you can't eat. Or this is where you can travel, this is where you can't travel. You can't own such and such types of guns. Yeah, I'm very much against gun control. In case you didn't pick up on that. That idea of gun control to me smacks of tyranny. It's always one of the next steps toward tyranny. It's one of the first things that a tyrant wants to do before he can get rid of, your liberty, is to keep you disarmed. To keep you from being able to fight back for your freedom. So, I certainly don't want to have to do that. I don't think anyone wants to have to do that. But, I mean, that's the option that people should have as a free people. Thomas Jefferson said it best when he said, "One nation can long preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that the people preserve the spirit of resistance. Let them take arms." And in another point he said, "I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing, and is necessary in the political world as storms in the physical." This is a very bright mind. He was wrong on certain issues, certainly like slavery. I mean, he was a little too pragmatic and willing to accept slavery. But by the same token, he, in most ways, represents the basic libertarian mindset, or libertarian philosophy, which is, best described as he put it in his notes on the state of Virginia, that the legitimate powers of government extend only to those acts which are injurious to others. That is to say, if you're causing injury to other people, that's the role of government to stop that. And that's pretty much the role of government. That's pretty much the only role that government legitimately has in our lives. And so that's pretty much the libertarian philosophy summed up by Thomas Jefferson in his notes on the state of Virginia. Very well summed up, pretty much. And that's basically what I believe. I believe that people should more or less be free to run their own lives, and that the role of government is just to keep them from harming each other. And that's pretty much it. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, but that's pretty much what I believe. In any case, what was I going to say? The other thing that I really want to do, and this brings me to that, is to kind of discuss history a lot, discuss philosophy, my own thoughts as well, on those things, ethics, comparative religions, what they teach, what they represent, and be, more intellectually honest about those things. People are not intellectually honest. They're willing to misrepresent, other points of view and create straw man arguments, so that they can knock them down. For instance, if I were to say that, how should I say it? If I were to say that all Hindus support the caste system, and if I were to walk up to a Hindu and say, "Why do you support the caste system? This is why the caste system is terrible," and I know the Indian government banned it years ago, but you still support the caste system. You clearly do, because you're a Hindu, and all Hindus support the caste system. You're presenting a misrepresentation of Hinduism there, because obviously not all Hindus supported the caste system today or even then. Gandhi, from what I can tell, didn't seem to really be a big fan of the caste system. So to say that all Hindus support the caste system, all Hindus therefore are repressive towards people of a lower class or lower caste, would be to kind of create a straw man, so you could knock down Hinduism. Or to, say that Shinto in Japan was tied in with the militarists, and to make it sound as if the Shinto in Japan still backs the old militarists, which is kind of silly. That would be kind of a straw man argument to attack Shinto. That would not be very fair to those who practice Shinto. If you disagree with Shinto, then you disagree with it honestly. You should disagree with it honestly in an intellectual way, against what they actually believe, not what you say they believe. You should actually bother to check on what they believe and whether or not, that is something you strongly disagree with. I mean, my own background is that of, more of an evangelical, Christian, Protestant background. Currently attend a Baptist church. And if somebody were to walk up and say, well, Baptists all agree with, the Southern Baptist Convention and what it says, and therefore because I don't agree with the Southern Baptist Convention, or for all Baptists are wrong, that would be kind of silly, it would not be intellectually honest to say that, to lump them all together and say all Baptists are, Southern Baptists, and agree with the Southern Baptist ideas, the whole convention system, Southern Baptist Convention. For instance, I'm Baptist, but I'm definitely not a Southern Baptist. My church that I go to is not part of the convention, is not part of the whole system there. It's more of an independent Baptist, more of a fundamental evangelical Baptist. If I were to, for example, if you had a Calvinist and an Armenian arguing with each other, and and a Calvinist were to say all Armenians believe, that, such and such, Armenian says, no, that's not us. And Calvinists keep saying, hey, this is what Armenians believe, and therefore they're guilty of this, and you shouldn't be an Armenian because of that. Or if the Armenians did the same thing to the Calvinists and say, all Calvinists, for example, believe in all 5 points, and the Calvinists were to try to say, hey, wait a second, I don't believe in all 5 points of Calvinism. For instance, I don't agree with limited atonement or something like that. That would be a strawman argument for an Armenian to present against the Calvinists. If I were to take that into the political sphere, if I were to say that all communists agree with Mao, that they're all Maoists, and if I were to launch into an attack on Maoism, which frankly I don't think that many people agree with in the real world, because it was a very flawed system, very brutal system. In fact, lots of millions of people died under that system, under Mao's tyranny and his terror and all that. Then, obviously, painting all communists with the same Maoist brush is not necessarily intellectually honest. I mean, you could be much better to simply say, well, first of all, I don't agree with Marx. I don't think that Marx was a realistic person in understanding human nature, understanding the importance of the incentive of the work ethic and so forth. That his formula to each according to his ability, each according to his need, was not a very, realistic, practical system. And that even on paper, communism really doesn't sound that good, including Marxism, especially Marxism and Leninism and so forth. But that's more of an intellectually honest argument. That this flies in the face of human nature, doesn't work. Whereas to compare them, to say that they're all like the Khmer Rouge or the Maoists or the Stalinists is not intellectually honest. It's straw man. There's not much time left before I get ready to go to bed, but I wanted to at least, kind of present, some ideas and introduce myself. So on that note, I think it's about time for me to end this session, at least.
It's been a motor mouth.
That was my wife saying I've been a motor mouth. But
I heard that.
Well, I think the whole world heard that, honey. But truth be told, I guess I just wanted to get this whole thing. There it goes again. Want to get this whole thing started, So now that I've gotten this whole thing started, some point I'm going to have to kind of disconnect and get ready to go to bed, get some sleep. But I want to develop some comfort with the whole thing, develop some sense of what I'm doing with the camera. Let me see. The main thing that I would like to do is probably present kind of information about history, those who are familiar with it, maybe civics, American history, American government, the Constitution, introduce people to writers that they may or may not be familiar with, writers that I think present a very good case, especially for the libertarian philosophy. The writings of men like Judge Andrew Napolitano, Ron Paul, people like that. And I don't always agree with 100% of what Ron Paul has said in some of his writings, and I don't always agree with 100% of what Judge Andrew Napolitano says. But, I think that they have some very good cases for what they believe. In many areas, my ideas and theirs do overlap. Particularly rejection of the Federal Reserve System, which I believe is a very bad, very flawed system that we have inherited for over 100 years from the progressive movement, which I think has been very destructive of this country. I believe that the progressive movement has done so much harm to this nation. And I think that the arguments against a sound money system are straw man arguments. I think that they really are, intellectually dishonest arguments. Arguments for the Keynesian system are similarly intellectually dishonest. They present it as, well, this is the only alternative to the Great Depression. This is the only alternative to these problems. And I would like to point out the Federal Reserve System was already in place for 16 years when the Great Depression happened, when it began. Federal Reserve System could very well be blamed for the Great Depression in many ways. So to say that the Great Depression was caused by something other than the Federal Reserve System, and that's why we need the Federal Reserve System, is a very flawed, very historically inaccurate argument. I believe that this country needs to move away from the Federal Reserve System, and we need to get rid of the Federal Reserve note. We need to have either gold or silver or money backed by those things. We need to become a lot less hostile to alternative ideas like Bitcoin. We need to be allowed for more competitive currencies. Things like that. I do not accept the argument that this will destabilize the economy. I believe that if anything, it will present an alternative to the monopoly system that has been in place for some time with the Federal Reserve, where they would seek to establish a legal tender monopoly over our banking and financial and monetary structure. It gives them far too much power. You've got these, charter banks, the Federal Reserve banks, and they have far too much power over our economy to set interest rates and so forth, the prime rate and so forth. And they have influenced our policies in a way that I think fundamentally did help trigger the last recession that is probably not completely over even now. If they had a recovery, it was, as some people said, a jobless recovery, which for all practical purposes doesn't really amount to a recovery on the street to the average everyday person. Doesn't really help most people. Recover. What good is a recovery if it doesn't bring jobs, growth and so forth? I think fundamentally, where we got off the wrong track, it started to be in the mid to late 19th century in some ways, destroying the idea that states could secede from the Union, destroying the idea that the Constitution was a voluntary compact among the states. I think that the South was wrong in its reasons for secession, but I think that the right to secede was fundamentally still very much a constitutional right. It was just it was a right that was abused by the South in 1860. I think that they left for reasons that were very flawed. But I do think that they had that right legally and constitutionally, and the Civil War undermined that right. Established much more of a unitary nation-state system than should be the case. It kind of reinforced the whole Henry Clay American system, the Whig Federalist model for a long time, protectionist tariffs and so forth, which if you look at the McKinley tariff, one could argue that the McKinley tariff in particular helped trigger the Panic of 1893. And not, by the way, the competitive currencies or the gold system, gold standard. I believe it was very much more things like the McKinley tariff. Because it was a prohibitive tariff. It was not a protectionist tariff. It was a prohibitive tariff. It was so high that it really fundamentally, drove alternative products out of the system. You create a problem where you have serious economic dislocation from something that high. raising the prices, making things unaffordable for so many people. It just becomes a very economically unsustainable model. McKinley had a lot of good points, but his tariff was a very bad idea. But that's just an example. But that is the Whig Federalist model. You had the earlier Morrill tariff, named after Justin Morrill or Morrill, whatever you want to call him, how you want to pronounce that. But he had a very bad idea with that tariff. It was very flawed, tariff. It was extreme. It was not. We're not talking mild tariffs here. We're talking about extremely high tariffs. And that was the Lincolnite, Hamiltonian, Henry Clay model that went along with the whole idea of the nation state. The United States being a solitary or a singular centralized nation with a strong central government. The American system, as Henry Clay used to call it. And I don't think it was very American, personally, but that was how he presented it. So, as you can see, I am, like I said, a bit of a history buff, including American history. I think that we have a lack of understanding of history now. And that lack of understanding of history, along with a generally impatient mentality as a culture, rush, do this in a hurry. You've got to get here, get sense of urgency, or all that other stuff, sometimes can be a bit overzealous and result in excessive haste and flaws and mistakes being made that wouldn't otherwise be made. People rushing to do things, and in the process they overlook important details. I'm very much more of an attention to detail kind of person. I'm much more interested in being thorough, being methodical, analytical, deliberative. I suppose if I were to be holding public office, I'd be more of an effective senator than some of the other positions. I would probably not make as good of a governor maybe as a senator, more of a deliberative type, analytical type person. Some people are really good at the quick thinking, fast on your feet, reactive thinking, and that's fine. You have to have those people in this world. They help make the world tick too, and make the trains run on time, and so forth. But people like me, I think, are the ones who help determine where the train should run to. People like me who understand that it's not just enough. How did George Herbert put it? Competency makes the trains run on time, but doesn't really know where they're going. It's not just enough to make the trains run on time. You have to idea the destination. And people like me are about the destination. Where do we want to take this? What kind of world do we want to live in and pass on to our family, our posterity, our descendants, and so forth? And I think there's much more of an emphasis on, let's just do this and get this done, and who cares if this is the right thing to do? Who cares if this is what's best for society or civilization? Let's just do this and get it over with. And ring, 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 ring. Move on, move next. There are people in this world that are like that. Sorry, I didn't mean to scratch my head, but, itchy. Like that. But anyway, there are people in this world that do that. And they're like that, and they're necessary. But there are people in this world that are like me and are also necessary. We're not idiots. We're not stupid. People may think that we are because we get nervous or we're deliberative or cautious. It's like I was telling my supervisor the other day, I am a very cautious person, It's just in my nature, So I've always been very cautious. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people seem to think there's something wrong with that, but that's just how I am. We need both types of people. We need the quick thinkers, the ones who think fast on their feet and do this and that, immediately, urgently, and so forth. And they need people like me who think more carefully, deliberately, and methodically, more analytical, who get the picture of, the vision, where we want this thing to go. what are our end goals, our purposes. Not just the means, but the ends to the means. So, you need people like me because of that precise reason. I'm not being very articulate right now, probably, and especially not being familiar with this new genre. I'm being nervous again, But I do believe that we need people like me, that fundamentally, yet, there's more to life than simply getting the next buck, getting the next sale, getting the next I should say promotion or whatever, there's more to life than that. That you have to have an idea where you want the world to go. What kind of world you want to have, and that is a critical piece of the puzzle that's missing. I think, I think that a lot of people are missing out on that part of the puzzle, and I think that I can present that to a certain extent. I can present the other side of the coin, as it were, the deliberative thought process, a more philosophical approach to things, a more intellectually honest approach to things. If you disagree with somebody, for instance, I disagree very fundamentally with Mormonism, you have a reason for disagreeing. You know what that reason is, what it is you don't like about that. And you don't necessarily hold the people involved themselves as bad people, For example, I've met plenty of Mormons, I know plenty of Mormons, and they're not bad people. But I do think that they are fundamentally in error on key points. And that would be a good example, because it's, I want to be intellectually honest and not say, well, I'm disagreeing with them because they practice polygamy. Well, no, they don't, except for the renegade factions. They don't practice polygamy. So that would be another straw man argument to say that, well, I disagree with the Mormons because they have plural wives. They don't. So, if you're going to disagree with somebody, you know why you disagree with them. I know why I disagree with the Nation of Islam. I disagree with it for several reasons. And I know what those reasons are. I'm not going to, distort things and say, well, this is the reason, and it turns out that this is just a generalization, a straw man argument, I can think of one clear example in that case is where they believe that all members of particular races are inherently evil, which is obviously a racist position to take. And some people may not want to realize that an organization, from a minority could be racist, but there is such thing as racism against Caucasians just as much as there is such a thing as racism against minorities. Just like there's sexism against men and there's sexism against women, both exist. So, I suppose what I'm trying to do here is just, like I said, introduce myself and introduce my ideas and give you the first feel for what they are and for who I am and what I am. As you can see, I am married. I have referred to my wife and even interacted with my wife during this webcast. You see, I do have stepchildren. I don't have any actual biological children, but I do have stepchildren. I won't say their names. This is on webcam. I do not say my own name for obvious reasons, for the same reason. I do not say my wife's name. But I give you some ideas to what I'm about and what I'm into and what I present, what I favor, and disagree with and so forth. Some of my interests, like I said, history, civics, comparative religions, ethics, philosophy, the etymology of certain words, the root of certain names, and so forth. I will not go into, like I said, what my first name is. It has a very interesting etymology, very interesting root to that name, having to do with a certain figure in the Christian Bible in the Old Testament in particular. Not the New Testament so much as the Old Testament figure. A prophet. I won't say which prophet. But the reality of things, as far as I'm concerned, is that this is just a intro for me, not only for the world to me, but for me to the webcam, as a medium, as a method of communication with the world. So I'm, still feeling it for this. I'm still getting a sense of what this is like. I'm still not sure I'm comfortable with how my voice sounds on the webcam. But I am glad that my wife has been helping me, kind of learn this stuff a little bit. I'm hoping she'll help me learn in the next day or so how to upload it to YouTube so I can actually get this on YouTube. Let me see what else. Let me see. It's getting close to bedtime anyway. It's probably about enough for now. But one or two more things. Let me see. I'm into games, of course. Sometimes, though I haven't played them lately. I'm into computer games and video games, but I don't do that all the time. Like I said, I haven't really done it very much lately. My stepson plays more games than I do lately, which is not surprising. He doesn't have a job right now. Doesn't go to school. So it's one of those things where, not really much else to do but chores and games. We kind of expect the chores from him. Sometimes we have to work with him and get him to do the chores. We have to, encourage him to do them. And kind of set boundaries. But I do like games, and I do like, I said, books. A lot of different kinds of books. I would like at some point to find some of the books that I've lost. One was a copy of what's called the Tanakh. That's the Hebrew Bible. Well, not Hebrew is in the sense of being in Hebrew, although I wouldn't mind learning that language at some point. But it was actually the Bible translated directly from the Hebrew into English. But it's only the Old Testament. It's only the Hebrew side of things, the Jewish Bible. And it was very fascinating. There were some distinctions between the two. It was published by something called the Jewish Publication Society. So you're going to have a different perspective in how it's interpreted and how it's translated and so forth. Because you had it was more of a rabbinical, interpretation influencing how it was written and so forth. Let's see. Anyways, I think a more recent one compared to the earlier, I think it was like 1970s or something like that. I'm trying to remember. Version of it. And whenever I get that on there, I will probably show that a little bit on the webcam if I'm still doing webcam communication at that point. Let me see. I guess some part of my brain's not wanting to go to sleep yet. I do need to go to sleep pretty soon. Classic case of insomnia, I guess, but I'll probably go to sleep pretty soon anyway. I need to set a little bit later bedtime in this case, so I can get plenty of sleep. I'll just set it for 8 or something. Not giving as much time on the computer in the morning, but I'll have more time later on at night to make up for it. Gotta get some more sleep anyway. I usually like to have about an hour, when I get up, but I don't think that's very practical right now. If I want to get some sleep, I think it's more important that I get some sleep than that I have time on the computer. Gotta have some priorities. This probably wondering what this is. It's a scar I got when I was about 5 years old. Cat scratched me. There's nothing exotic about that. It's just, I was petting a cat, my family's cat, and then a rival cat or, territorial, aggressive type cat came over and started a fight with the cat that I was holding. And I didn't get out of the way in time because I was only 5 years old and didn't know better. So I ended up with a scratch on my face that is more visible when I shave than when I don't shave. Can't really hardly see it underneath a mustache, but it does leave a bit of a scar. The nose is a little bit strange in the sense that it's kind of off to the side a little bit, and it's got a little bit of a narrow nasal passage, which makes it hard to breathe in, breathe out, and blow my nose and so forth. When combined with asthma, that can be a little problematic at times. I've actually run out of the albuterol in my inhaler at some point, and I have to refill that. Let's see. Oh yeah, I was going to say about my nose. I did get punched in the nose when I was a teenager. Probably did some damage that has never been fully fixed. And it was like I'd had any surgery or anything. Not sure how much damage it did, but obviously I'm still able to use my nose. So that's the main thing. I won't say who punched me in the nose. I won't give away any names. That's not something I want to shame anyone with. That's, kids do things when they're kids, and they make mistakes. I was probably as guilty in that fight as he was. So, I kind of went berserk in that fight too, so I can't really blame him 100%. We got a little bit rough, and there were some consequences. But let's see. As you can see, I probably have a little bit of bags under my eyes, probably from not getting enough sleep lately. It probably shows, like I said, brain has a tendency not to want to shut down at a reasonable time. Let's see what else. I do need a shave. I got a bit of a stubble. I'm kind of annoyed with Facebook right now because they did this thing with the they did this thing with Messenger, Facebook Messenger. It keeps popping up on my browser. Keeps doing this thing of telling me that the Windows doesn't support Facebook Messenger anymore, which is funny because I don't really use Facebook Messenger very much myself. Let me see what else. Just like I don't really Skype either. Let's see what else. What was I going to say? I'm definitely still getting used to this. I was going to say something that totally was on the tip of my tongue and it kind of left. Maybe I'll think of it tomorrow when my brain's fresher. But anyway, this is kind of, I guess, a preliminary or introductory or whatever you want to call it. I guess my brain's all tired here, not thinking of the right words, right adjectives, but preliminary, no, not in preliminary, introductory video journal. So it's kind of a tentative work here. Anyway, I wanted the world to kind of see my point of view. I think that other people's point of view have been presented, and that's certainly fine. But my own point of view, I think, is relevant as well. And somebody liked to say at some point, I'm sure I got where I heard it, but everyone's entitled to my opinion. But the way I see it is that, people have views, and in good conscience, they must present their views at some point. and let people know what they have to offer, or if they have something to offer, at least in terms of ideas, and at least let those ideas compete in the marketplace of ideas. So, and of course, I keep saying it's a bad habit. My 10th grade not history, sorry, English teacher kind of got on me for that, but never broke me out of the habit. Sorry, Mrs. Blau. But it never quite broke me of that habit. Let's see. I very much doubt that my senior year English teacher was overly fond of it, or my 11th grade English teacher either. But that habit never completely went away. Let me see what else. Like I said, I'm a bit of a history buff. I like certain types of movies. I can probably tell you who certain actors are. And at one point I tried to get a promotion, or actually not a promotion, but a transfer to a different department where I work. And one of the things that I said was that I can point out, who certain actors are and certain movies are, but actually some of the more recent ones I wouldn't be able to tell you very well because I'm not kept up with the more recent stuff. There are some pet peeves that I have. At some point I might give movie reviews that might be interesting as part of my whole thing, but I'm no Roger Ebert. I don't always agree with Roger Ebert either. The late great Roger Ebert. He was a very good movie critic. Although I didn't agree with his politics among a few things, but I certainly didn't agree with him on the movie Gladiator. I happen to think it was a very good movie myself. Not very historically accurate, but Hollywood is Hollywood. They're not going to get it all right by any stretch of the imagination. What was I going to say? I think that there are far too many remakes in Hollywood. They way overdo that. They go far too far. Come up with an original idea now and then, will you please? Something new. Something not rehashed from 1960. Something probably better than the original, the first time around. And some remakes are okay, but I mean, come on. That's all they do half the time. And I think a lot of the TV series have gotten to where they're a lot better, at least in some ways. Like, I'm partial to things like the Tudors, Rome, and so forth. They cover historical periods. I got a little bit into Boardwalk Empire, but I haven't really got that far into it yet. I really got into Game of Thrones, which isn't historical by any means, but I've been reading the second book of the George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire series, and so far it's been pretty good. Reading it slowly because I'm reading it on my lunch breaks a lot of times. But I've actually got quite a bit ahead in the series than I have in the books. And I don't want to give anything away, so I won't say it happens in the series or anything that I've read so far. Or I've seen so far. But this might be some of the things I'd like to do. So again, this is kind of an introduction. I might do the equivalent of some sort of a lecture, or not really lecture so much as conversation and discourse on history and so forth. My style is much more, I would think, conversational style, or not necessarily a lecture, but maybe a little bit of monologue to a certain extent. But in any case, it's probably about time for me to hit the hay. So I've said that several times, but I think it's about time to really do this now, to go ahead and get some sleep. I need to get up a fairly decent time. So signing off now. Pretty soon here. And about ready to test and see what this actually sounds like. And about 49 minutes in. 49 minutes of me rambling. I don't even know if this is going to see the light of day, but we'll see.